The scream that cut through the thin apartment wall was brief, wet, and final, followed by a dragging sound that neighbors later described as unmistakably human, unmistakably heavy, and far too calm for panic on that sweltering Houston night in July that would not be forgotten by anyone there ever. If you like stories like this, make sure to subscribe and like the channel. By the time patrol units reached the aging brick complex on Elgin Street, the humidity had turned metallic, sticky, and oppressive, as if the air itself remembered what happened behind Unit 3B's scuffed door. 21-year-old nursing student Jenna Morales had not shown up for her clinical shift, nor for her evening class at Houston Community College, nor for her weekend volunteer commitment at the women's shelter. She was the type of young woman whose absence registered immediately, punctual, focused, quiet, meticulous. When she failed to respond to calls, the supervising nurse contacted her mother in Pasadena, who drove straight to Houston, terrified, insisting something was wrong. She had keys, but when she reached the apartment building, she could not bring herself to open the door alone. Inside, nothing looked like a struggle at first glance. The television was off, her textbooks open, her planner pinned to the corkboard with highlighted deadlines ahead of schedule. Her shoes were lined at the entryway in perfect formation. There were no broken dishes, no overturned furniture, no bruised drywall. Only the faintest scent of bleach hung in the air, mingled with a watery smell that would, in time, prove to be diluted blood. The carpet beneath the window, cheap tan, fraying, had a darker shadow that absorbed the afternoon light. 1 square foot, maybe 2, but enough for responding officers to call in homicide. Detectives from HPD's Major Offenders Division noted the clean edges of that stain with unease. Whoever wiped it knew exactly how to erase evidence without appearing to erase anything at all. It was not frantic, it was practiced. Forensics collected threads from the baseboard, faint traces of coppery residue, and lifted a partial shoe impression from the hallway, men's, size 11, inexpensive rubber sole, the kind sold at any chain store in Texas. Not distinctive, but present. That mattered. The complex itself housed mostly students, hourly workers, and transient renters who stayed for a semester, then vanished into Houston's sprawl. Yet one tenant on the courtyard-facing side seemed to know more about everyone than anyone ever knew about him. 42-year-old maintenance worker and long-term resident Dennis Hargrove kept a tidy routine: early shift, midday errands, quiet dinners, nightly walks with his rescue dog. He was polite, helpful, and notoriously observant. Tenants claimed he remembered details others forgot: class schedules, delivery times, family visits, arguments through walls. Some laughed about it. Some avoided him. When Jenna disappeared, he made sure to tell officers he had been awake. He had heard something, and he had reported it immediately. He described the sound at 11:34 p.m. precisely. A single scream, cut short, then silence, then a dragging wait. Not fast, not panicked, but methodical. He claimed he did not open his door because he assumed students were drinking again, staging pranks. Only in the morning, when Jenna's car remained in the lot and her blinds stayed closed, did he decide it was suspicious. His statement was neat, rehearsed, almost too linear to match the chaos police usually encountered in missing person cases. The search began with Jenna's known movements that week. Security footage at the hospital showed her leaving at 6:12 p.m., purple scrubs folded over her bag, hair tied, face tired but composed. She stopped at a nearby grocery store at 6:45 p.m., buying only milk, granola bars, and a packet of index cards. The cashier remembered her because her credit card declined once, then approved on the second swipe. Nothing about that moment hinted that it would be the last time she was unquestionably alive. Neighbors reported intermittent sounds over the weekend: footsteps, cabinet doors, running water, but nothing distinctly violent. One tenant recalled hearing the washing machines downstairs running at 3:00 a.m. Friday and again at 4:00 a.m., cycles that ended abruptly before the rinse phase. That detail sit heavy in the case file years later. Interrupted washing cycles, perhaps to avoid overflowing diluted red water. Autopsy findings never arrived because there was no body. Instead, forensic analysis of the stain on Jenna's carpet confirmed human blood, type O negative, matching Jenna's medical records. Not a spill, not a nosebleed, not an accident, volume consistent with fatal injury. The bleach traces were enough to confirm tampering, but not enough to reconstruct pattern. Whoever cleaned understood dilution ratios perfectly. Jenna, ironically, did too. Nursing students spend hours learning sterilization, the chemistry of disinfectant, and the threshold where removal becomes destruction. The killer either shared that background or learned it watching her. Media pressure escalated within days. Local stations aired her smiling volunteer photos, crucifix necklace bright in sunlight, scrubs neatly pressed, eyes warm. Her mother appeared next to detectives, voice breaking but controlled, insisting her daughter would never disappear willingly. Houston papers reprinted a chilling detail. Some of Jenna's nursing textbooks had been wiped clean, as though fingerprints had been removed from their glossy covers. Who cleans textbooks after committing violence? Attention circled back to neighbors. Most had stable alibis, a handful had traveled out of town, and only one had been awake precisely at 11:34 p.m. and willing to note every sound. Hargrove's timeline was precise, almost too concise. When detectives re-interviewed him, his statements expanded. He remembered hearing Jenna's door open earlier that evening at 9:20 p.m. then close again. He remembered the fridge humming louder than usual. He remembered her shower running at 10:00 p.m. and stopping at 10:17. He remembered details that seemed impossible unless he stood close, listening. Search warrants for his apartment revealed a spotless living space. Floors waxed, counters bleached, drain traps scrubbed. No biological traces, no fibers matching Jenna's unit. Yet in his storage compartment, officers found a small collection of tenant duplicates, spare keys, old rent notices, scribbled schedules of neighbors' routines. Jenna's name appeared twice, her class and volunteer hours marked. Not incriminating by itself, but deeply unsettling. A man who knew everyone's patterns now sat at the center of a vanishing. Digital forensics uncovered no relationship between them. No messages, no calls, no confrontation. But building hallway footage captured Hargrove passing Jenna's door 5 times in the 48 hours before she vanished. He carried tools, trash, and once, nothing at all. He never knocked, never spoke to her on camera, merely orbited her living space with a rhythm that tightened investigators' focus. 3 weeks later, trace evidence from the complex's landscaping crew revealed fresh earth behind the dumpsters, but cadaver dogs indicated no body. Soil testing uncovered only bleach runoff, mixed with detergents and ammonia. Someone had flushed, washed, and rinsed. The absence of remains became proof of deliberation. Jenna had not been taken impulsively. She had been erased. As months passed without confession, tip lines flooded with false sightings. Her mother kept her room intact, scrubs folded, nursing texts bookmarked. Detectives preserved the case file like a living wound. Everything pointed to the neighbor who heard everything, who remembered everything, who spoke fluently in timestamps and domestic silence. Yet nothing tied him physically to blood, fibers, or fingerprints. In 2004 Houston, the case sat at the edge of solvable, leaning into dread. In the years that followed Jenna Morale's disappearance, the apartment complex on Elgin Street transformed by vacancy rather than renovation. Residents moved out quietly, avoiding conversations about the stain that once marked Unit 3B's carpet and the maintenance worker who remembered every sound except the one that could exonerate him. Law enforcement kept the file active, not closed, but its presence grew dust-heavy in Houston's evidence vaults. The city expanded, towers rose, downtown cranes cut the skyline, and yet that single July night remained unaltered, suspended, a moment that refused to degrade like blood diluted by bleach. Detectives rotated, promotions shifted, retirements came. Each new investigator who inherited the Morales case revisited Hargrove with the same cautious precision. His composure remained uniform, polite, unfazed, cooperative, never rattled by suspicion that had lingered like formaldehyde on his reputation. He had left the complex in late 2005, taking a job north in Conroe, remarried briefly, then lived alone again on a quiet stretch of highway where pine shadows stretched long across gravel roads. No arrest had ever materialized, no definitive forensic tie existed, and without a body, Texas law demanded more than intuition. Cold case protocol advanced over time. Evidence once tested through basic serological methods underwent newer, more sensitive analysis. Partial shoe impressions extracted from Jenna's hallway were scanned using enhanced pattern recognition software, revealing a distinct diagonal scuff on the right heel. That imperfection, investigators learned, appeared on only a limited number of mass-produced soles released between 2002 and 2003. The shoe type could still belong to thousands, but only one resident in that building had purchased that exact brand during that exact span, confirmed by old credit card statements recovered through a subpoena issued long after the receipt ink would have faded from a wallet. It belonged to Hargrove. He claimed repeatedly that he had thrown them out years ago. No record of disposal existed, no photo, no second-hand donation trace. The absence of proof neither confirmed nor cleared. It simply sat in the case like sediment, heavy but inert. For Jenna's family, years turned soundless. Her mother stopped speaking publicly after 2007, declining interviews, refusing candlelight vigils, rejecting documentaries that promised closure but delivered only speculation. Yet she never moved from the belief that Jenna's killer had lived steps away from her that night, wall to wall, listening, waiting. Her father, more private, returned to work as an HVAC technician, driving circuits across Harris County, passing hospitals where Jenna once trained. Silence became ritual. Detective Isabel Cortez reopened the Morales file officially in 2014, one of Houston's most meticulous cold case analysts. She observed patterns not in blood or timelines but in language. Hargrove's statements over decades, though consistent, held tonal variations. The initial interview had featured neutral descriptions. I heard a sound. I was awake. I reported it. Later statements adopted sensory detail, thickness of footsteps, the length of the scream, the precise window of shower water. It was not the facts themselves that alarmed her, but the evolution from observation to choreography. People rarely remember more over time, auditory memory decays, but his sharpened. Cortez visited the old complex, now remodeled with new siding and new tenants unaware of the vanished student who once lived among them. She spoke with aging neighbors, most of whom had been students then, scattered now across states. One recalled something not noted in the original file. Jenna had complained once lightly about someone entering her unit without authorization. A small shift in furniture, a cereal box moved, blinds tilted in the opposite direction. She had dismissed it as misplacement, never reporting it, never suspecting surveillance disguised as maintenance. That recollection struck Cortez hard, not because it proved intrusion, but because it suggested proximity as intent. Forensics re-examined the diluted carpet stain using refined spectrography. The new reading indicated not only bleach, but also trace chloramine, a compound formed when bleach meets certain detergents improperly mixed. Nursing students memorized warnings about that chemical reaction. So did janitorial staff in large facilities. Hargrove had worked custodial shifts years before. Both understood cleaning chemistry at functional depth. Both could dilute without detection. Yet only one had access that night. With renewed warrants, investigators searched his Conroe residence. The home was sparse. Bare counters, uncluttered rooms, minimal personal effects. The drain traps, however, still bore microscopic residue of protein structures consistent with long-term cleansing agents. Not incriminating alone, but context shapes meaning. His trash record showed weekly disposal far below average household volume, suggesting either an ascetic lifestyle or secrecy in removal. He claimed to compost. No compost bin existed on the property. Cortez logged it without reaction. Digital footprints uncovered nothing predatory, no messages to Jenna, no fixation online. But a forensic audit of building maintenance logs revealed a pattern. In the months before she vanished, Hargrove had used his key access to enter multiple units for filter checks and routine inspection. Only 3 tenants ever confirmed an appointment. Jenna was not one of them. Her mother remembered once finding her daughter's keys missing briefly, then returned to the hook where she always kept them. That detail had been dismissed in 2004 as forgetfulness. In 2014, it became a piece of architecture in a larger blueprint of access. Cortez attempted one more interview. Hargrove received her politely, offering tea, maintaining the same composed stare. He denied entry to his garage, citing insurance regulations. No such regulation applied. His voice, unchanged by years of implication, retained the cadence of someone narrating rather than recalling. He described the scream again, identical words, identical tone, like a script preserved in airtight memory. She left with nothing physically new, but with confirmation that nothing had ever unsettled him. The case then moved not through breakthroughs but through accumulation. Every small, inconsequential trace, shoe scuff pattern, bleach ratios, hallway packing, access logs, settled into alignment. Houston PD drafted a circumstantial file strong enough to present to the district attorney for review, though still lacking the central artifact, Jenna herself. In late 2018, a construction crew excavating old drainage at the former complex uncovered a rusted pipe sealed at one end. Inside lay no body, no bones, nothing directly biological. Instead, soaked cotton fibers consistent with scrubs and a plastic ID badge frame fractured by pressure. No tag, no photo, no name, but hospital uniform experts identified stitching patterns used exclusively in 2004, nursing garments supplied to Houston Community College trainees. The pipe's inner walls tested positive for bleach residue, matching the compound mixture found once in Jenna's unit. Not conclusive, but precise enough to draw lines between absence and act. Media erupted again. Headlines invoked the vanished student, the neighbor witness, the years of suspicion. Hargrove declined all interviews, citing harassment. The DA weighed charges but paused, lacking the irreducible evidence the law demanded. Without DNA, without skeletal confirmation, without direct transfer, the case remained perched on an edge that Texas statute could not cross safely. Predictably, public attention faded a second time. The complex, rebranded, filled with new tenants who never knew the name Morales. The pipe evidence remained in storage, tagged, sealed. The carpet square sat in a climate-controlled vault, fibers numbered. Cold case investigators often speak of atmospheres more than events, the lingering quality in certain files. The Morales case had that quality. It was not merely absence of resolution. It was a residue of precision, a crime executed without panic, by someone who knew volume thresholds, disposal methods, observation angles, and the architecture of sound traveling through drywall. 2 decades after Jenna's last recorded movement, Cortez stared at the full board of timelines, grief portraits, autopsy absence reports, hallway prints. The neighbor who first claimed only one scream had ultimately known the whole sequence: door, shower, fridge, footsteps, silence. He remained unindicted, untouched by statute, aging in rural quiet. Yet every piece of the case leaned toward him magnetically, relentlessly. The cold file did not cool, it calcified. There are cases in Houston that drift, others that evaporate. But some remain, sharpened by repetition, darkened by certainty unconfirmed. The Morales disappearance stayed in that third category, unresolved not by lack of knowing, but by lack of the one artifact that could close the circle. In the end, only the neighbor had heard the beginning, the middle, and the end. Only he had remained precise, comfortable, and unmovable in his recounting of a girl whose absence became the only body the city ever recovered. The final documented attempt to secure charges against Dennis Hargrove came in early 2021, when a progressive assistant district attorney reviewed the Morales file with a perspective unclouded by proximity to the original investigation. She believed that certain cases, even absent a body, could be anchored by the totality of circumstance, access, motive without desire, witness without neutrality, and a pattern of controlled observation that transcended coincidence. What she could not overcome was the precise legal threshold, Texas precedent requiring more than inference, more than probable narrative, more than chilling alignment. She needed tissue, bone, DNA, a single undeniable particle of Jenna that could speak for itself. The case, still blood without body, fell just short. Detective Cortez retired the next year, not because of the Morales case but because of accumulation, years of files, names missing, found, lost again. But before she left, she recorded a statement in the confidential notes portion of the Morales archive. It was not evidence, nor procedure, nor admissible. It was simply her final professional assessment, typed slowly, page numbered, sealed. He listened not to overhear but to anticipate. Routine was not curiosity, it was rehearsal. She did not name him directly in that line, but the context required no imagination. The Elgin Street complex was torn down in 2022, replaced by student housing brighter, wider, safer by modern standards. During foundation excavation, ground-penetrating radar flagged anomalies under what had once been the laundry room slab. Construction halted for forensic excavation, and within hours a team unearthed a set of fragmented metal fittings, a section of drainage tile, and wedged deep in silt, a stainless utility tool scraped from years of weight and rust. The tool, a narrow industrial drain snake, bore minute traces of human keratin compounds and degraded textile fibers. Not bone, not flesh, not blood, but consistent with fabrics found on the badge frame recovered 4 years earlier. Lab analysts estimated deposition between 2002 and 2006. No direct match to Jenna existed, but probability narrowed again, tight as breath. In the forensic world, sometimes absence becomes architecture. Investigators examined the former building blueprints and discovered something they had not seen in original interviews. The maintenance crawlspace connected directly to pipes beneath Units 3A, 3B, and 3C, sealed with an access plate visible only from the laundry room corner. That space, long ignored, had provided silent, unwitnessed entry to anyone with keys and knowledge of construction angles. Only one person on record had both, the maintenance lead from 1998 to 2005. Years later, when community journalism revisited the case in podcast form, hosts lingered not on gore, because gore had never been found, but on timing, control, and unbroken confidence. They replayed the recorded statements of the neighbor who never contradicted himself, who never drifted from precision, who never once expressed fear over living next to a violent death. He presented as witness, not suspect, yet always adjacent, always awake, always listening. Among former residents, memory fractured. Some recalled his politeness, his quiet fixes, his efficiency with repairs. Others remembered feeling watched, never threatened but noted, catalogued. Students came and went, seasons rotated, but he remained like a constant in a formula. Even after moving to Conroe, that reputation clung with subtle force. He was the neighbor who knew everything but nothing, who heard the scream but felt none of the panic, who described not emotion but acoustics. In 2023, a quiet civil petition emerged from Jenna's mother, not seeking conviction but declaration of death. She had waited 19 years without burial, without a grave, without a location to place flowers other than the warm dust of demolished concrete. The petition was granted. In the courthouse hallway, she stood with paperwork confirming her daughter's status in legal language, dry and clinical. But she refused interviews again, walking out into afternoon heat that felt too close to that July night long ago. She had lost not only a daughter, but also the shape of memory that should have held joy instead of analysis. The Morales case remained active in limited form, revisited only when new forensic technologies emerged that might read deeper into nothingness. Dilute stains, vanished fibers, chloramine ghosts in carpet threads stored behind climate seals. Each innovation promised not certainty, but a narrowing of darkness. What persisted most was not evidence but tone, the icy calm of a man who narrated a killing floor as if describing weather. Law enforcement culture shifts slowly, but by 2024 many younger detectives studied cases like Morales in training modules, murders without remains, killers without panic, neighbors masking omniscience as civic duty. They learned that guilt does not always sweat, tremble, or confess. Sometimes it smiles, remembers, and waits out the clock. Hargrove himself, now in his 60s, remained outside legal reach. His health was reported steady, his address unchanged, his lawn trimmed with mathematical precision. His nightly habits were said to continue uninterrupted. Lights off at 10:00, blinds angled at the same tilt, porch swept each morning at 7:15. No one monitored him officially, yet those who knew the case believed he had never stopped monitoring his surroundings. That attention, once dismissed as friendliness or idle curiosity, had taken on a different timbre, method tuned over decades. There are moments in true crime where justice exists only in collective understanding. Houston, beneath its sprawl and humidity, quietly archived Jenna's name not just in vaults, but in whispers among investigators who passed her file down like an heirloom of professional burden. They knew the truth, not proven, not admissible, not sealed, but known in the way that certain crimes etch themselves into institutional bone. On anniversaries, a few former classmates still light candles near the address that no longer exists. They do not speak her last night into the air. They do not speculate about bleach, drains, crawling spaces, or stainless tools. They remember the volunteer, the student, the calm competence of a young woman learning to heal people she would never harm. In cold cases, remembrance becomes a form of evidence, not legal but human. No final knock ever came on Hargrove's door. No cuffs, no reading of rights, no confession. Yet in the quiet halls of Houston's cold case division, detectives refer to Morales not with uncertainty, but with the resigned clarity of those who have seen precision masquerade as innocence. Some cases are solved aloud, some in court, and some only internally, where the weight of detail forms its own verdict. The city moved forward, the building vanished. The soil was paved, repaved, and landscaped. The stain was cut from the carpet, cataloged and sealed. The neighbor lived on, ordinary to everyone except those who knew how silence had covered a scream at 11:34 p.m. and Jenna, though bodiless, existed still, documented in fiber, in witness timing, in the absence that no replacement structure could bury fully. What endures in this case is not doubt. It is the shape of certainty without closure, the outline of a truth that has nowhere to rest. Houston remembers her not in headlines, not in trials, but in the unspoken understanding that justice, though named, never arrived. The neighbor who knew too much always did.